Morning. So, yeah, I know I'm between us and lunch, so hopefully there aren't any grumbling tummies out there, but hopefully I'll be entertaining enough and the information compelling enough to keep us all pretty well engaged. So, I'd like to start out with a little story, and we'll see how many people, maybe by the raise of hands, who have experienced something like this. So, there was a business meeting. The executive director decided to have a management meeting, a normal monthly management meeting, just to keep the team on track, see what things are going on. And Susan had a mixed generational team, and she also had one new millennial manager. And the characters that were important in this story are Bob and Ed. And they are boomers, and Arden and Amber, who are millennials. And so the meeting starts, and Arden, who is the new manager, gets an opportunity to share some ideas. And he drones on and on and on. Not only does he take his time, but he goes 15, 20 minutes over, and he takes two other people's time, right? And so you can tell Susan's like, man, Bob and Ed are getting a little irritated. It's clear on their face. They're fidgeting, etc. and whatnot. This is just not working. So she calls the meeting. So after the meeting, Bob and Ed go down to the cafeteria that they've eaten at, for the last 20 years, and the conversation goes like this. Can you believe? He just shows up, throws up, tries to tell us what the heck, we're supposed to do. I've been doing this job for 20 years. He's going to come in here and try to tell me how to run my business or do things differently. Bob looks at him and says, yeah, those GD millennials, they're just all entitled. They just think they can do whatever they want to, and they, and get the prize without winning the race. Well, then Amber and Arden go down to the local kava shop, and they have, a shaken black iced tea with 3 pumps and a cup of Komodo Dragon, with extra 2% milk. And the conversation goes like this. Arden's like, man, I showed up, I gave them all of my best ideas, and all they did was poo-poo on them. I didn't get any respect. I think I'm going to look for a job someplace else where actually people respect me. Sound pretty real life? It is. There are very different ways that the generations communicate, interact. Matter of fact, Sandy was telling me a story about someone close to her that didn't want to pick up the phone just to resolve a problem. And then once they did, they get it done in 5 minutes. And the commentary was the phone call was terrifying. So we're going to go through some of those. We're also going to, some of the differences in the generations, we're also going to go through some things that we can do to solve those issues, because the reality is, in general, as Americans, we have very common priorities and values, common values, but they are in different priority orders, and we communicate very differently. So we have different workplace expectations, and we're going to cover those. And the data from the Great Resignation is incredibly compelling. Once you see it, you'll go, oh, I get it. So that's where we're headed. So we're going to talk about the 4 main generations that are in the workforce: Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and Boomers. There's only about 1.5% of traditionalists still in the workforce. Millennials are about 52% of the workforce today. So they are the biggest working cohort. So what is the difference between the different generations and what drives it? Boomers were driven by personal competency. This was, for instance, actually, by the way, I actually have some books with me. I give a few away as well. And this is the second edition, and it's literally just called Leadership Skills for Millennials and Gen Z. However, it's written for all of the generations to understand each other. And so in the book, we talk about how boomers looked at life and understood that you earned the right. And the younger generations didn't even understand what ETR meant. And everybody knows what ETR, right? Earn the right. In other words, I get my respect by my performance on the job. They also didn't even understand the simple term of what's an FNG. Arden clearly didn't understand that in this situation. And the flippin' new girl or flippin' new guy, so just clean it up there, right? The older generations were exposed to what are called transactional type of leadership. This type of leadership, this type of leadership is very simple. You do this for me and I pay you X. It also includes MBO, managed by objectives, which is fine, but the younger generations want relational type leadership, and we're going to get into that. The younger generations also don't understand, unless you're in the military, top-down control, command and control, or in the first responder. And I do a lot of first responder training because the younger generations of lieutenants and deputy chiefs coming up don't understand the values and the leadership training that the older generations, the full chiefs, have actually, divisional chiefs have gotten. Gen X is kind of stuck in the middle. We're literally called the forgotten generation, and we'll get to that as well. But the younger generations are looking for leadership competency. The issue is leadership competency means something different usually to everyone. And so boomers were born between 46 and 64. Some of their characteristics were, is work can buy me happiness. Now these are generalizations, and for the millennials in the crowd, when we get to your slide, don't be offended that you're being generalized, because millennials don't like to be generalized or characterized. So the older generations also found their relationships at work. Think back at the bowling leagues, the softball leagues, all the different things that we used to do in, work with the people that we worked for. Where did all that go? That's just not how things are anymore, and the younger generations don't do that. They also wanted upward mobility, and what's interesting is that after World War II, our government actually said, hey, we want to make sure, and you can look all of this up. There's a great website called The Story of Stuff that covers a lot of it. And in the book, we have links to all that. That how, the government was like, this is the war to win or end all wars. How do we keep another world war from happening again? And this is when America said we have to have the absolute greatest military that the world has ever seen and maintain that. What does that take? It takes money, cold hard cash. And so what the government did is they went out and consulted some of the greatest marketing minds in the United States. This is underneath Dwight D. Eisenhower's presidency. And they said, how can we do this? And they came up with a marketing plan, public service announcements, PSAs, and they created what was called the American Dream, home ownership. And so we were taught, if you buy a home, you'll be happy. Why did we create this American Dream? Once you buy a home, what do you have to put in it? Stuff. So the whole idea was to drive the economy, our manufacturing economy, make it the greatest economy on the face of the planet so that we could fund our military. The issue with this is that right in the memo, they state, we're going to basically convince the American public that they will get their spiritual, physical, psychological, and emotional needs met through material goods. Well, we all know that the only thing that we can actually satisfy through material goods is our physical needs, our base level human needs of safety, food security, those type of things. But our higher level needs have to come from a different place. And so what we watched, is that mystery fantasy family created by Hollywood called the Leave It to Beaver show. All right, and they painted a picture that this is what life should be like, and it's just not. That's not how life is, right? All part of this kind of grand scheme, and it worked. We're the greatest country on the earth with the greatest military ever. We have the greatest economy, so it worked. But the younger generations are finding out that those upper level needs aren't met by those material goods. So we get the Gen Xers. And what we found out is that we watched our parents, and they had the nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath, couple of Chevrolets in the garage. I'm gonna try to get away from that speaker. But they weren't happy. Every other household was a divorce. Only 5%, and this is a scary statistic, only 5% of American marriages our families are happy and functional. 52% of American children are born out of wedlock today. And our generation was taught to keep up with the Joneses. And you know why? Well, the problem is, the Chevy you're driving, that's just a normal everyday material good. You need the 3 Series BMW, then you'll be happy. That 3.2, you need the 4 2.5 in the swim tennis neighborhood, right? 2-story with the columns out front. Now you'll be happy. And our generation literally doubled down. And that's what we left to the younger generations, who in the millennials kind of looked at us and said, you know what? This whole material thing of trying to make and fulfill our upper level needs with material goods just isn't working. We're going to question everything. And they literally, lived up to the name of Generation Y. Not only just the letter Y, but WHY. And they're like, well, why should we think that money will make us happy? Maybe love will make us happy. Relationships will make us happy. And what they actually found out is some things the older generations could really pick up on, because this is actually true. From a cognitive, emotional standpoint, it is our human connection that brings fulfillment to our life, not the material goods. Matter of fact, when you reward someone and you get the t-shirt from where you went, or the reward at work, the reward or a gift only lasts, as far as enjoyment, for about 48 hours. But if you provide an experience, like where you actually took the person to the trade winds and gave them a reward there, they'll remember the trade winds forever because of the relational aspect of what was happening. So millennials actually started simply making their friends at work. And I've got 4 kids, 3 millennials, the oldest is 32, and she doesn't want to date anybody from work. She doesn't want to go out with anybody from work. All her friends are outside of work. She works for KnowBe4. Great company, and I'm like 90% of their, employees are millennials and Gen Z. It's a software company. And their idea is that people in society are important. And so this is a lot of the cultural change that's going on inside the United States, is that we're getting a little bit more concerned with people. And when we talk about a leadership position, what we've found is that people who are only concerned about money and production end up becoming more dictator type and demoralizing leaders. Those who balance that out with a care for the well-being of their people actually create high-performing teams. So there's actually some leadership science behind some of the things that the millennials have figured out. One of the things that's a little downside on the millennials is that they are 30% more narcissistic than the rest of the other generations. So if you think some of our politicians are narcissistic, in other words, think about it, it's a selfie generation. Matter of fact, the millennial generation through social media has actually created new social illnesses or mental illnesses. One is called selfie dysphoria. And that's like you take a selfie and you have to put the filter on it. And it's especially an issue with young women, and it's even worse with Gen Z, that they can't even look at a picture of themselves without a filter on it because they can't accept who they actually really are. And it's a psychological disorder that we're having to treat. So there are some downsides to being the first generation that has been 100% technically connected by the internet. There are also some really wonderful things as well, which we're all benefiting from, and the older generations are having to learn. By the way, I'm a first-year Gen Xer. So, and I was also, for the millennials in here, I am a gaming OG. I'm an original Donkey Konger, Pong. all the way back to the beginning of video games, and still love. My favorite game is Nazi Zombies on Medal of Honor. So anyway, Gen Z, we are the most stressed out generation, and we're also the most self-medicated generation. We're also the most overweight generation. And again, we're kind of caught in the middle with this whole idea of trying to, keep up with the Joneses, or why is it, the things that that didn't work out for us. So how is that different from Gen Z? Gen Z is the next current most stressed generation coming up, and they had to go through COVID. So when I was at work teaching at University of Tampa, I had students that were so full of anxiety they couldn't come out of their dorm rooms to come to class. And some of them, when they came to class, literally broke out in hives. I talked to my own kids, and I've interviewed for the book over 200 millennials and Gen Zs, as well as older generation little cohort members. And one of the things that they are stressed out the most about is keeping up with us. They see mom and dad with the 4-bedroom, 2.5, 2-story house and the swing tennis, and they think they're going to graduate college and that's what they're going to move into. It's just not realistic. We have created in our both through different types of parenting techniques as well as in the school district, unrealistic expectations for our younger generations. And that keeping up with the Joneses is literally ingrained in that generation, and they're just freaked out by it. And the sad part is for the most part, because of our economy, what most of them get is $40,000 to $60,000 in student loan debt. They can't get a job that'll pay them enough to buy a condo or a home in our area, and they're stuck living with friends or with mom and dad. I actually told that to a group of millennials, and I literally had one young woman just begin to break down and cry because I described exactly what she was living through. So it's different. Their experience in life is different. When we talk about narcissism, though, and selfies, anybody here like a lot of the commercials that are like, hey, this is my cause, this is my... If you watch TV, you gotta see these. And the person says, well, this is my cause. It's great to have a cause. But the younger generation has been taught by a new ethical theory that altruism is evil. People like Mark Cuban and Angelina Jolie are spokespeople for this ethical theory that started out in the 60s. And that if I do something, what it says is, if I do something kind for you and expect nothing in return, that's wrong. The only reason why I will do something nice for you is if I get something in return. So their idea of selflessness is not something that this generation has been taught or ingrained in general. I know there are good parents out there that have done that for their children, but in general, that's not what's going on. What's going on is I have a cause, and the only reason why I have a cause is because it's going to make me feel good. I'm going to get some self-value out of donating $20 to UNICEF or volunteering for this program. I'm going to benefit from it, and it's not an outward selflessness act. It's actually a selfish inward act to try to fulfill what? Their higher needs. Their higher needs. So you kind of see there's a theme through everything that we've been talking about is that it's the higher needs in our society, psychological, emotional, and spiritual, that are just simply not getting met. And that's where all the new leadership science is going. It's called cognitive preferences or cognitive behavior therapy. And here's some proof of it. So if you take a look at some of the top concerns for Gen Z and millennials, what's interesting is boy, they look a lot like the rest of ours. Cost of living, climate change, or, however you want to name that, unemployment, health care, mental health of my generation. That ought to tell you something right there about Gen Z. They understand themselves You know, I don't know if you know the statistic, but 20 million Americans, there's only 250 million of us or so. 20 million of us, it's almost 10%, are on some form of like an antidepressant type drug, and another 20 million or more are taking them illegally or self-medicating with, you know, illegal drugs, too much alcohol, etc. And then down at the bottom, crime and personal safety and sexual harassment. You know, the Gen Zs have actually zeroed that more down. And of course, we had the great Me Too movement, which is something that has been a great thing for the United States as well as the world. So what do Gen Zs, you know, and millennials, what do they want? What kind of behavior do they want out of us as an organization? Well, if you take a look, if our companies are not making a social impact, or our businesses are not making a social impact, it is highly likely, 53% basically say that they will leave the company within 2 years. If we are doing a good job in making a social impact, it's just the opposite. Almost 50% will say that they'll stay for 5 years or longer. There's a line in the sand, and it's clearly delineated how we retain, how we attract, and how we keep younger employees. How well are we doing with our diversity and inclusiveness? If we're doing well, the vast majority will stay for 5 years or more. If we're not doing well, the majority or near majority will leave within 2 years. And if we're not doing something sustainable, same kind of a thing. At least half or more, almost half, if they're not satisfied, they're going to leave within 2 years. If we're doing a good job, they'll stay for 5 or more. It's pretty clear cut. You know, these generations are literally living out their values. And here's one of the reasons why. When I was in corporate America, I had a boss who came up to me once, and he told me, "You are my model for people I hire." I had a wife, 4 kids, a couple of cars, a mortgage, because he knew I would put up with all of his crap because I had bills to pay. I won't take a hand note in here, but I can guarantee you that most of us can understand that. The younger generation who might be single still, they're mobile. They don't have to put up with all of the things that we might have to. And it was funny because my peer, who I shared responsibilities with, happened to be single with no kids, and he did. He moved back to New York. He wouldn't put up with it. And my boss was so bad, it was a hostile environment. Eventually the company fired him. 2 women complained, they proved their fact, and he was let go. Me? You know, I looked for a job, you know, but at that level of, at a national responsibility, those jobs were pretty thin at that time within my industry, and so I put up with it. And so companies understand that that's the fact, and companies are actually catering to the needs of the younger generations and overlooking Gen Z. Gen X, and we get overlooked for promotions as well. Because why? We need the paycheck. And so the environment that we're working in is just becoming so much more important to understand how to relate to each other and kind of what's going on. And thank goodness, a lot of boomers and Gen Xers are actually taking a note from the millennials and Gen Zs and starting to think about this work balance or quality of life issue and reevaluating what they're doing, which is one reason why I got into leadership. I left corporate America in 2016 specifically to pursue a doctorate in leadership so that I could stand here and do this, to help other leaders understand the people that they work with, the people that they work for, and make that situation better, which is what the book is about. So, some of the other things, right? If they feel empowered, 66% will stay longer than 5 years. But if we are not empowering our employees, they'll leave within a year or two at the most. And none of us like to not feel heard, right? If they don't feel heard, only 24% would stay after for 5 years or more. 47 and 54% will leave within a year or two. So that empowerment piece is very, very important. And again, the empowerment piece shows respect for the person. And that's one of the points that's super duper important to understand about millennials. Millennials have been taught, as well as Gen Z, that they have value because they're human. The older generations were taught we have value because we perform well. It was based on our behavior and our performance. And at work, we didn't get any respect unless we ETR'd it, unless we earned the right to have that respect. And the old saying, oh, this isn't personal, it's just business. Yeah, well, all business is personal to the younger generations, as well as to myself. So, the younger generations want to have relationships with us. They want to be mentored. They want to learn from those that have the knowledge, and they understand that we have the business knowledge and the understanding, and it's something that they want. But they will not listen to anything that we have to say if we do not first respect them as a person. They have human value. And so there's two types of respect in our society and in our workforce now. That is first respecting the person for whom they are, right? I mean, the Me Too movement was all about what? Respecting women for who they are, like we should as good men, as men that have character, right? Well, it's no different than the younger generation or anyone else. We respect people because they have human value. And if we don't give them that first, they don't care about work value, earned value. They don't care what position you hold. This also explains why so many of them talk negatively about national leaders and leaders, because that leader has they feel that that leader has no respect for them as a person. Therefore, why should I provide any respect back, no matter what office or stature the person may have attained in the political or business realm? Does it make sense? And I tell you, that is one of the most biggest things that we need to take away from this session, is understanding that every single one of us has value simply because we're a human being. And that's where relationship starts. That's actually where fulfillment in life also starts. You know, it's just like with your kids. You would never tell one of your children or your spouse that they have no value as a human being. Why would we think that of anyone outside of our family? It's just a key human trait. You know? And by the way, the reason why we do that is, anybody watch The Water Boy? Mama said it's the alligators obligata, right? Or obligata. For thousands of years, we were chased and everything was trying to kill us. So we call it a lizard brain, or our base brain that controls our emotions, is always negative. It's always trying to defend ourselves. It's the place where the start, stop, and freeze, fight, or flight response comes from, right? And so we naturally don't trust other people because of thousands of years of, developing as humans. We have to overcome that with rational thought and go, you know what? Mike's no danger to me. Matter of fact, I value Mike, and that's the basis of our relationship. Not because he holds a position that he does, but I love to go watch him when he plays and sings. There's a valuation in humanity, and that has to transcend our natural angst towards building relationships and trusting other people. Now, back to our flexible workspace. Look at how many actually want flexible working conditions. The ability to work from home, usually at least 2 days a week. All of the data shows people get more work done when they have a flexible schedule and they have the ability to work wherever they need to work from. There's an old saying, work is wherever work gets done, and at whatever time it gets done. So I used to have a construction company. I worked 7 to noon. I took noon to 5 off and spent that with my family. And then from 6 to 9, I met with clients. Worked out great. Got my family time in. Absolutely loved that time of life. We got matinee prices at the movies. We got to go to the places where, nobody was at, because, it wasn't dinner time. And of course, we got lunchtime prices for food. So with all of that said, here are some of the reasons why Gen Zs and Millennials are actually choosing new jobs. Those ones, that are leaving within a year or two. By the way, think about it. Last time you left a job, did you leave the job or did you leave your boss? Thank you for not raising your hands, especially if your boss is in the room. One of the reasons why I pursued my PhD is I've had some great bosses, and I've literally had those that have created toxic environments. And I simply didn't want my children to have to, go through some of the things I went through in my work career. And nobody wants that. But the old saying's true. We typically don't leave a job. We leave, who's managing us, not leading us. So, good work-life balance, learning and development opportunities. High salary or other financial benefits is actually third. For the older generations, usually that's number one. And I'll tell you, in my career, I chased the almighty dollar, and I took the highest, paying job that I could, regardless of title. I'd rather have more money, and I was in sales and marketing, and more variable compensation for performance than I cared about my title. Positive workplace culture, we're going to get into that. And that comes from what's called industrial psychology or positive leadership psychology, which is what our consulting training company actually teaches, as well as innovation and creativity in the workforce. They want to derive a sense of meaning about their work. In other words, work isn't just about the money, there should be a higher purpose to it. So for instance, anybody know what used to be the number one most requested item from third world countries? I got a book for anybody that's got the answer. I got a book for anybody that'll take a stab at the answer.
Soap. Water.
Come up and get the book. But shoes. Shoes. Globally, shoes. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, who was the shoe company that when you bought a pair of shoes, they gave a pair of shoes? Tom's. Yeah, guess what is now the number one most requested item from third world countries? Socks. Exactly. Bombas. What do? Buy a pair, give a pair. There's a purpose greater than just making money at those companies, and they retain and hire, grow, and retain high quality millennial and Gen Z talent because they have a purpose that's beyond themselves. So I love the water question back there. So for all of our people that are, next week I'll be at FASD, and there'll be a lot of water district officials there. They're all helping us live with clean water. Although I do wish in any of the next reclaimed water that we would actually go ahead and de-smell it, deodorize it. Thank you. I feel sorry for certain neighborhoods because you go into them and there's a neighborhood that are $1 million homes, and when you drive through the neighborhood, it smells like a toilet. But the lawn is gorgeous. Yeah, exactly. I wonder what they're putting in that water. I think there might be a few extra minerals left over, right? Yeah, it's pretty nauseous. It's pretty bad. Also take out some of the iron. So Some of the differences that we've been talking about, and honestly in the book, this is one of the most commented chapters, and it goes through different value systems, chapter 4 in the book. And a lot of us have the same values, but they're in different priorities. So for instance, in that story with Amber and Arden and Bob and Ed, that's called finding acceptance in work groups, and there's literally social norms about that. And so in the older generations, when we joined a work group, what happened to us was we didn't say anything for 6 months because our bosses, thank God, let us know it's going to take 6 months for you to figure out what you're doing in your job, another 6 months to get good at it, and at that time we'll evaluate whether or not you are welcome to our group and can actually give us some suggestions. We ETR'd. The younger generations have been working in teams since they were in kindergarten, all the way through university. When they get put on a team, they instantly, in their minds, have equal participation, equal respect. They're an equal member of the team, and therefore, day one, they have the right to share their ideas. And frankly, a lot of them are great ideas. However, younger generation, there is a time and a way and a place to share those ideas, and that's a skill that's learned. We had to learn the skill, as older generations, you guys have to learn the skill as well. There is a way to, for instance, even if you come to us and say, yeah, there's a problem with, that's a negative statement. You instantly started out the conversation with a negative. How about let's learn how to, this is part of creativity and innovation in the workforce optimization. How about we phrase that, how might we? Is there a way we could find to? Now all of a sudden, instead of stating a negative, you've actually turned the issue into something that's actionable. It's not negative because guess what? Because of that obligata, that lizard brain, negativity sticks to human beings like Velcro. Literally positive things slide off us like Teflon. And so most of the time, that little voice on our shoulders is talking negative things. We have to use the logical part of our brain to override our base nature, I guess I would say. And so being a positive, focused human being actually takes work, and it learns those knowledge, skills, and abilities that were in my bio. Thank you, Mike. Because being positive, learning how to actually communicate with each other, learning how to become a good team member or a good leader, you have to have knowledge, you have to gain skills, and the more you practice those skills, they become abilities. And if we don't do any leadership training, guess what we don't have? And I've got a good buddy who owns plastic injection molding companies. He got C's in high schools, never went to college. But what he did do is read book after book after book on sales, marketing, and leadership. And those are his 3 functions. And he has 2 plants in China, 1 in the Dominican Republic, and he used to have 5 in the United States before a recession hit. He has, I think, 2 here still in the United States. And he builds like rocket parts. He's like, it's not rocket science. He's like, but then again, we do work for like Grumman, and Honeywell. Whether you got C's in high school or not, you can still become a great leader. You can become great at whatever you are, but we do have to pursue new knowledge, skills, and abilities. So mentorship is a big thing. The positive work-life balance, I want to just share a quick story. So there's a young man, he's 28 years old. His name's Ross. He actually wrote one of the things, the preface for my book. I was coaching him. He was a vice president of a financial firm by the time he was 28 in Atlanta. Super successful. Married about 26, but no kids. So they're dual income, no kids. Life goes on a little bit. He has 2 children. Now all of a sudden, this work-life thing starts to get a little bit more important to him. He was promoted from the Atlanta area to run the entire branch in the Carolinas. Right? So an elevated, vice presidency over, with more responsibility. So he says, Greg, my family is really suffering, and if I go and talk to my bosses and say I have a life quality or a work-life balance issue, I will instantly be labeled lazy. Now here's a young guy who, by the time he was 28, is vice president. He isn't lazy. He's smart, intelligent, worked his butt off, etc., right? But the moment he uses that terminology, he's a bum. So he's like, what do I do? I said, that's real easy. Just go to your boss and say you need to renegotiate your benefits package. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. That's how the rest of us got our work-life balance, is we negotiated extra weeks of vacation, extra sick days, or whatever. Can I bring my spouse with me on my business trips? I did. Which helped, because I traveled a lot. Sometimes, 3 weeks out of the month when I had national responsibilities. So bringing Debbie along was a huge, huge value. And sometimes the kids would come. I did my work. They got to do whatever they were wanting to, but I negotiated that with my boss as a one-off, off the books, perk. And then some of my friends on our team found out, and it grew a little bit. But do you see just the simple difference in terminology? So from a boomer and Gen X standpoint, ask for clarification. What are you actually asking for? What is the outcome that you're looking for? When you say something like a work-life balance, something really offends us, right? Because, work-life balance, we were salaried. You work until the job's done, right? If you don't close the sale, your kid doesn't get the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, right? If you're a younger person and we say something that's offensive, and I won't say the word, but it sounds like Yahoo, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to have a Yahoo of a time, except for a different country word, right? I'm from Missouri, right? My daughters looked at me and were like, oh, Dad, how could you say that word? I'm like, what did I say? And they're like, oh, you don't know what that means? And yeah, it had a new reference to a female body part. I was clueless. So just millennials, Gen Zers realize that sometimes we have no idea what we might have said because we do have different vernacular. The one thing that helps work that vernacular or in the vocabulary out is, guess what? Relationship. And some reverse mentoring. Hard work, they love to work hard, but where they work might be a difference. So what I want to kind of get down to is kind of, okay, we got some of this information of the differences, but what do we do now? What can we do to fix some of this? And the first thing is to understand that we lead people and we manage processes. So back in the day, when all this management science started to, grow, especially here in the United States in that manufacturing society, Dad went to work typically, was taught how to manage a process, and then came home and tried to manage his family the same way he managed something at work. And look what it got. Half of every household is a divorce. You do not manage people, you manage processes. We motivate, inspire, and lead people. Matter of fact, one of the greatest gifts that the feminine gender has given us is literally an ethical theory that brings personal relationship, emotions, and understanding into the workplace. And what's funny is that when you add care and well-being for the people that work for you, that is the element that takes average teams and makes them high-performing teams. And that comes from what's called feminine theory. It was created by a woman in the 1960s and has been being infused into the workforce ever since. And every single one of us is better for it. And all of the things, when you look at, retention, employee satisfaction, performance, productivity, efficacy, efficiency, all of those numbers go up when you add that to what we do in the workplace. We lead people, we manage processes. And so some of those leadership theories that we're talking about go all the way back to what's called Vroom's theory of motivation. And again, these were all management leadership studies on how we can make the workplace better. There's an XY leadership type, and we're not going to get into all these. We get more into what they look like in practice. Path goal leadership, and then it led to transformational servant-based leadership. Things like congruent leadership, authentic leadership, and now we practice what's called fluid leadership. So there's something that's simply called their first, or single loop, double loop, and triple loop thinkers. A single loop thinker, all right, and I had one of these. Wonderful guy, played for the LA Rams, All-American from Michigan, you know, typical, I mean, his hands were so big, he had a tablet for a phone and it looked like a regular-sized iPhone. But he treated every employee like they were corn-fed, Nebraskan, white dudes. Problem was, our number one market was South Florida. So he took over, and I'm like, Mark, that's not how they do business there. I said, you know, my wife is Hispanic, and I understand and love the culture. And they're like, why are your lunches like 2.5 hours long? I'm like, no, that's because I'm sitting around with the family and I'm having a colita that, you know, Mamacita made in the back of the office. You got to get to know the people. Wow, we're not doing that anymore. Cut my budget. You have a maximum of an hour, you know, for those meetings. And literally our business dropped by 50% within about 8 months. After he actually saw the reality, and I'm like, you know, you need to realize not everybody thinks and buys and does business like you. That's why the right type of critical theory is good, because the right type of critical theory actually tells the story from the other person's standpoint. And if you're religious, right, it's like walk in their shoes for a little while, and then you'll actually see what it's like for them to live in America and live in a workforce and not be in the majority. And so we went back to doing the things that we do, and we got all of our business back and everything and whatnot. And he learned a very valuable lesson that we have to be at least what's called a double loop thinker, which simply recognizes the fact that, you know what, every single one of us in here has a different life experience. Some of us grew up with a single mom. Some of us married single moms. Some of us grew up with just a dad. Some of us grew up with a family who had both parents in the household, et cetera, et cetera. Some of us grew up in the Midwest. That's why I have no accent at all, because everything there is like vanilla ice cream. It has no flavor. You know, others, you know, that speak English, and I go down and I visit my relatives from Kentucky, and I have to take out one tooth so that I sound like they do. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, since I have people in Kentucky, I can say that joke. And not Louisville, because you know Louisville is really Indiana, right? I'm talking in the country, in the sticks, Kentucky. But you get the point. And triple loop thinkers just simply live that way. They just live from an understanding that no one else is like me, and I need to get to know that person in particular and understand how that person needs to be led, which is what's called fluid leadership. And so the scary thing is when you talk about the generations, only people who have really gone to college, really after about 2010, at minimum 2000, has been exposed to any of the modern leadership styles. And so what do we do? This is why America spends more money on leadership training than any other type of training today, at least the last time I checked the statistics, or it's at least at one of the tops. Because there's a massive gap between what the older generations think leadership competency is, as opposed to what the younger generations think leadership competency is. We have to bridge that gap. So this is a Blake Mouton real managerial grid. When people go through my training, again, I am a PhD researcher. We use the real deal. We don't use like some trumped up, you know, kid in the back room made up some survey. We use the real things that Harvard, matter of fact, I've taken 6 classes from Harvard, and I use a lot of the material from Harvard in my coaching pieces, and we use the real deal. So when you take a survey that we've done or that we sponsor and give you feedback, man, it is like the PhD level. It's the real deal. It's not something somebody made up. But what basically their grid shows is that simply this concern for production and concern for people, only 25% of corporate managers fall above the status quo leadership. I'm sorry, fall above the status quo leadership. That means 75% of corporate managers are literally in the what's called incompetent leadership range. So simply what we do is we impart KSAs, and this is part of that training, so that we understand, yeah, you got to have concerned production, you got to get the job done, but if that's all you care about, you're going to demoralize your workforce and all the productivity is going to go down. If you add concern for people, and we show ways to do that through coaching and mentoring, positive strength-based employee development. When you add that component to it, there's something that sparks within us as humans that will work for your boss with blood, sweat, and tears. They'll go the extra mile and they won't complain about working late hours. You know, the old saying is that to be a leader, you have to have voluntary followers. If the people that work for you would not work for you without a paycheck, you are not a leader. You are some form of a manager. Now, I had to look at myself, and I have a slide that has a monkey looking in the mirror. You know, it's like, you ever see the movie Night at the Museum? And the monkey stole his keys, and the monkey's peeing on him, and all kinds of stuff. And he gets really angry. And Theodore Roosevelt walks up and says, hey, who's evolved? You were the monkey. Okay, right? We have to do some introspection and take a look at, would our employees work for us if they did not get a paycheck? Would they follow us? If the answer is yes, yeah, we're doing something right. If the answer is they're constantly on dice looking for new opportunities, we've got a problem. And so we have to look in the mirror and make some changes. Now, when we talk about leadership styles, and in a minute, I'm actually going to put up a QR code that I would like for everyone to possibly take. And there are what are called cognitive preferences. Again, in our DNA and how humans have developed over the years, we have developed certain cognitive preferences. Those show up in the workforce, they show up in our relationships, they show up in many, many different ways. And there are 4 distinct ways that people either like to lead or be led by. Most people like to be led or lead by achievement type leadership style. Most leaders are promoted because they got stuff done. They're achievers. But there are also different types. Directive type. Directive leadership is more micromanagement. You know what? Most of us hate micromanagement, but at the right time, it's the right thing to do. So for people, for instance, who don't like working in ambiguous environments where things aren't sure, they like to have, hey, do step 1, 2, and 3. That's directive leadership. There are times when we have to do that. Participative is like mentorship. I'm going to come alongside of you and I'm going to do it with you. The problem is the one in the middle that's all yellow with the one red, it's called supportive leadership. That's the one that actually meets our higher needs. Again, the problem is those of us went to university prior to 2000, 2010, we weren't taught any of this stuff. We have no idea what it means to be a supportive leader. And that's why it's so important to get the type of training that we do, because that is actually the #1 leadership style that millennials and Gen Zs perform against the most. They have the most enjoyment or employee satisfaction, and the ethical violations go down, not only individually, but as a team. And yet we are the least taught and least skilled in that particular leadership style. So if you don't mind, what I would like to do is if you would just grab your phone, the QR code will take you to the survey that will actually show you what your natural inclinations are in regard to leadership. And once the meeting is over, I will email you your results, personally. So it is anonymous. No one else will be able to see where you come out at. I literally had someone once come out red on 3 and yellow on 1. And most people would interpret that that's really bad, but the reality is that it simply meant that the person didn't like to be led nor lead, but the guy was a great leader. But naturally, he just is like, I could take leadership or leave it. But he had great leadership skills. So there is no wrong or right answer to this survey. It just is who you are. It's based on our DNA. Same as me. Give another minute or so here to complete that. Some people are surprised, other people are like, nah, that's exactly who I am. And remember, the research and the surveys that we do are all based in cognitive or science, behavioral science. They're the real thing. All right. So I wanted to mention a little bit about that supportive style, because most of us have not been trained in that, and most of us haven't been led by it. You know, once I learned this stuff, I actually went back to my adult children and I apologized to them for some of the things I did as a parent, because if I had known what I knew now, especially the difference between strength-based discipline that actually improves skills and performance versus punishment, I'd have been a much better dad and a much better husband, by the way. So supportive leadership is the one that builds relationships with your subordinate because you display simple concern for their well-being. You're giving them respect because they're humans. It creates a supportive environment and a positive environment that helps the emotions and job satisfaction increase. When we're working in a positive environment, we actually get more done, our brains are freed up to be creative, and we actually come up with better decisions and ideas, not just better performance. And so, when we're talking about positive leadership styles, and by the way, the squares on the slide also correlate with the reasons why high-performing people leave jobs. But here's how we motivate all the generations. We coach our employees with strength-based coaching. There are literally a technique I use, it's what's called strength cards, and it is an actual hard leadership skill to learn how to coach your employees from a strength-based standpoint. And I'm telling you, this is an epiphany for anyone who actually genuinely wants to lead their people, is this skill. There's more feedback from this session on understanding how to do strength-based employee coaching than I think about anything that we do, which is building on strengths, positive questioning skills, again, making sure that we're staying out of the negative, promoting self-discovery. That little survey you just took is a little self-discovery. We do that throughout all of the sessions, how well you listen, how well you coach, etc. We need to keep the emotions upbeat. We help anybody in here not want to feel appreciated, because all of these things lead to people feeling appreciated, and that leads to employee satisfaction and improved performance. It's been proven time and time again. And by the way, we started this science in 1936. So this isn't really something new. It's just in America, we didn't do a great job of sharing and adopting it in all of our universities. So 2 quick things before we go and close up. There is something that's called a foresight framework. Most large organizations throughout the world, including governments, use this model. It is ranked the #1 model for building teams, multi-generational and diverse teams. For instance, IBM uses it, and then they use other processes that go along with it. Because there are 4 types of cognitive preferences. Here's what a cognitive preference is. All the way. Oh. Threw you my fastball. Throw it back to me. Let me step out of the way and throw it back to me. Are you not naturally left-handed? Okay. Throw it to someone else. Catch. Throw it with your natural hand, or just throw it to somebody else. Okay, pass it on. Yeah, keep them like. Yeah, you can get them all the way in the back. Now, did anybody have to think which hand they were going to throw that with? It's called a cognitive preference. Now, the thing is that in life is that there are 4 types of cognitive preferences the way we see life. Some of us like to clarify what's going on. They're the question answers. They're the data gatherers. They like to move slow and define what we're actually trying to do. The next one is there are ideators. I call them the ponytails. I'm a high ideator and a high implementer. My wife's an ideator. They're usually in sales, marketing. They're the creatives. And every time it's like they hear a problem, the first thing out of their mouth is several ideas on how to fix it. The third type is people that like to do planning. It's only 6% of us. These are usually like software developers. You know, it's a rare preference. And the last one is the most of us, which is implementers, 23% of us. Those are people who take ownership of something that gets done and make sure it happens. They usually become the leaders. However, lots of times clarifier becomes leaders. So here's this thing. You ever hear the old saying that 25% of people in life are just going to like you? 25% of people are going to not like you, and there's nothing you can do about it? And 50% can be swayed? This is why. Because think about it. If you're a clarifier and you want to define the issue and you move slow and you're working with an implementer that says, get it done, get it done, get it done, those thinking types butt up against each other's heads. So what this model does is there's assessment, we self-discover, find out what we are, and it is based on human DNA. It doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter ethnic background, race, gender, doesn't matter. It's how we're built as human beings, and we cannot change it. The great thing is if we're like a really high clarifier, we can learn how to ideate, develop plans, and learn leadership skills. Again, we call them the shadow sides. We can learn hard skills that help us become more well-rounded leaders and business people, and government employees as well as first responders. Now, the thing is, like we said, is that those 4 things work out in how we talk, and we will literally talk as a clarifier. We'll talk as an ideator. We'll communicate as a planner. We'll communicate as someone who wants to take charge. And those communication styles rub the other ones the wrong way. By the way, this is also why a lot of spouses don't get along. So I also am a life coach. I'm a mental health coach. And this is one of the #1 things we do for married couples, because they understand. It's like, oh, that's why they always do that, and it drives me up a freaking wall. And then they're like, oh, that's what my spouse does. It drives me up a freaking wall. And when they find out, we teach each other how to talk the other language and give room. Like, for instance, ideators, I am super jovial. I love to tell jokes. And there's a right time and a wrong time. Matter of fact, my pins when I walk into a meeting are like Ultraman. Anybody know who Ultraman is? Cool, thanks. At least one other nerd in the crowd. All right, or like got a little head on it with red hair, growing. I just love fun stuff, But that gets on the nerve of the clarifier. Like, how can you be playing at a time like this? I just want the facts. All right. So, and then, one of the reasons why it's so powerful is because it takes the people into consideration, the well-being of the people, and then adds process to it. Processes such as Agile, Lean, Six Sigma, MIT design thinking, etc. So we manage the process, but we lead the people. And when you put the 2 of them together, guess what? Most of the issues between the generations fade away, because we're doing so much better of a job communicating to the person, to the person, to the person, and working through the process together. And that's what leadership is.